we're going to be a bit late. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We're going to have a few more minutes before we start. It's just the nature of things. I know it's 2024. So many things are virtual. If you could just bear a few more patience. This is such an international seminar series, and we're working through some tech checks at this moment. But I do want to welcome you. Just sit tight. We'll be with you in a couple minutes with Dr. Salim Tamari, our 5th installment of Archives and Heritage for Palestine. So see you very soon.
شايفيني؟ زبطت
مرحبا يا دكتور.
سلامات يا هلا. انا متاسف على التخلف، انا مش قادر اعمل السيستم كونت.
ابدا، كله الحق علينا، نحن ما فسرنا مزبوط. Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for your patience as we are work through the usual virtual tech world problems. Thank you very much. Such an honor to be here with Dr. Salim Tamari and my co-host Tam Rayan. I'm going to hand it over to you, Tam, to welcome and open the event. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and so wonderful to see you, Dr. Tamari. So wonderful to have you, and welcome everyone. This may be your first time coming to one of our events, or it may be your 5th, but this is a year-long series that we've been putting together for the past about 6 months, and it's in response to the ongoing and urgent situation in Palestine, where we've been witnessing the structure and erasure of heritage sites, archives, museums, libraries, and intangible cultural heritage. It's been over 430 days of Israel's genocide in Gaza, as we have watched the continuous wreckage of Palestinian life and land, as well as illegal annexations of the West Bank and Israel's invasion of other Arab lands in Lebanon and Syria. So this series really is an initiative to act in solidarity with our Palestinian and Arab colleagues and institutions in the safeguarding of their heritage, history, and memory against this ongoing Zionist erasure. As well, it's also an opportunity to amplify their courageous work within the archives and heritage sectors at large. So thank you. It's great to have you. It's great to welcome you to this space. And I'll pass it back to you, Jamila.
Thank you, Tam. And as part of our refusal to normalize the death of Palestinians and of people in the region, we always begin our events with a moment of silence for all the martyrs of Gaza, of Palestine, and of the surrounding countries, and all those who have fallen in the struggle against Zionism and imperialism in the region and globally. So please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Back to you, Tam.
Thank you for sharing that moment with us. I'd also like to provide a land acknowledgement, as we do in this series. I'd like to acknowledge the land on which I live and work. I'm located in Michigan, but I encourage you all to understand and reflect on your own relationship with the land on which you reside and the different intricacies of colonialism that may impact where you are residing at this moment. Michigan, and especially the University of Michigan, where I live and work, resides on the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fire Confederacy of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, as well as the Wyandot Nation. This land was obtained under coercive and dishonest treaties common in the colonization and expansion of the United States. This land was ceded under the promise that the University of Michigan would provide education and service to the descendants of the traditional peoples of this land, a promise that was never kept. In acknowledging this painful history, I advocate for all Indigenous struggles against ongoing settler colonization and strive for a decolonized future in the US, in Palestine, and in all colonized nations. As well, I'd like to give thanks to all our partners and sponsors who we couldn't be doing this series without. The Archives and Heritage for Palestine series is a joint initiative of the Middle East Librarians Association, the American University of Beirut's Palestine Land Studies Center, Publishers for Palestine, and the Archives and Digital Media Lab. We're also sponsored by the Lebanese Library Association, City University of New York's Archival Technologies Lab, Library Freedom, We Hear, and Uproot. I'll also introduce myself. So I'm Tam Rayan. I'm a PhD candidate at the School of Information in the University of Michigan, and I specialize in archives and digital curation. My research is focused broadly on how colonialism operates through archival infrastructures and how we can build more transformative archival representations of those in diaspora and those who have been affected by colonization. Specifically, I'm interested in how to better serve and represent the record-keeping needs of Palestinians with unique intergenerational traumas impacted by forced migration, displacement, and exile. And then I'll pass it to Dr. Jamila to introduce herself.
Yes, my name is Dr. Jamila Ghaddar. I am from South Lebanon and currently an assistant professor at the Department of Information Science at Dalhousie University and the founding director of the Archives and Digital Media Lab, as well as a lifelong activist in the anti-Zionist struggle. I'd like to, as part of that, invite you all into the struggle with us for a free Palestine and an Arab region free of the Zionist project and its ethno-supremacy by joining us and signing a call to archive against genocide that was launched during our first event with the esteemed Dr. Salman Abu Sitta and Ghada Dimashq. As usual, we're told that the statement is being blocked because the word genocide is in it. But please take a look, read the statement, sign, and be part of the movement to archive against genocide. Still not going through. You can always check it out at www.archiveslab.org. And as part of that, the statement calls for the boycott of Zionist institutions that are supporting, active in, or complicit in the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the settler colonial project in Palestine. And without further ado, it's a great honor, Dr. Tamari, to introduce you, though you don't really need an introduction. I will put your biography in the chat for everybody to read, but on a more personal or a more direct note, I'd like to point out for everyone watching today that your work has been foundational in writing the history of Palestine, not least before the Nakba, but certainly after. It's also been a careful kind of forensic investigation into archival gaps and where and how we can figure out the history of Palestine against all the odds, against all the destruction, against all the theft of history and archives and so on. And having done that careful work for ours today, I hope we can really shed light on it. Many of our audiences are archivists and librarians and heritage professionals who may not be as familiar yet with the contributions you've made, as in other disciplines might be. So that's what our conversation is here. we're going to start by inviting you to present what you'd like to share us today. And then we're going to have an informal conversation and help make some connections between your work and the archival profession. So please, Dr. Tamari, let's go ahead and set you up to present. Let's have some fun with the technology and get you to present. So I'm gonna tell you that at the bottom of your screen, you will see a little bar that says mute, stop cam, settings, and present. If you hit the present button, if you see it there, don't hit the leave studio. We don't want to lose you yet. And
So
please,
I do slides and PDFs?
it's up to you. You can do either.
Oh, so do I do it now or later?
If you're ready to present your slides now, you should hit slides and PDF.
Okay, so.
And then you hit your computer at the bottom there. And I'm going to thank everyone in the audience for your patience.
Share screen? Should I put share screen?
Sure, yep.
So share screen. Follow these steps. Wow. I must apologize about my grasp of this technology. You have your computer, I see. Upload file.
Yes. So if you hit upload, you will have a pop-up window come up.
Here we go. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. You have every right, after everything you've done in the world, to have a little problem with StreamYard. There's no issue there. Thank you again, everyone, for your patience. We're a bit delayed being able to do this before the event started. Again, just the usual technical difficulties. But there's no doubt it's more than worth it to hear your presentation, Dr. Tamari. Hello, Kristan, welcome.
Thank you. So I clicked on upload my presentation, and where is it now?
Well, it will be on your desktop somewhere, perhaps, or in your files somewhere.
My desktop,
All right, yeah.
Virtual. Okay, I don't have it.
That's okay. Do you think we can do it without your slides? Is that okay?
It's I have a number of images because it's about the photographic archives. So it would be useful.
Absolutely.
To have it on. I could, of course. Okay, now I say open. Do you see anything opening?
Not yet.
Chat with, can you mention? Okay.
Okay, so now you should be able to see at the bottom where you can see your image. You can see beside it a separate little box that says uploading. Do you see that?
It says uploading, having issues.
Okay.
I saw something.
That was my accidental test.
Oh,
Thank
no.
you. Thank you.
I got very excited.
I know, but maybe we could trouble you to put Dr. Tamari's bio in the chat while people wait for us to do this. So did you see something when you hit the file and you hit open? At the bottom of your screen, there's like an extra image of yourself. And then beside it, it's a box.
Yeah, I see that.
And then you can see these 4 dots. If you hit those dots, or just click on it, it should work. Yeah, click on it. Try clicking.
Remove, edit, stop.
Just click on the box, not the three dots.
Oh, on the screen itself?
Yeah, click on the little box beside your image at the bottom.
You are in the show, everyone.
So there's you, and then there's the file. It's its own box.
Okay, so I click on that, nothing happens. So let's try again. I'll go back.
If you would like, you can email it to me and I can share them for you.
I did email it to you. You should have it in your box.
Right. It might have just gotten lost somewhere in the uploading. Do you think you...
Shall I email it again?
Sure. Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Do that. Hello, everybody. Thank you for letting us know where you're coming from in the chat. It's always good to know. Usually.
Okay. I'm sorry about this.
It's okay, Dr. Tamari. With everything we have to worry about in the world, surely this is not high on the list.
So I send it to Ghaddar.
That's me.
And here we go. Here it is.
Okay, and you got the attachment in there?
Yeah.
Great.
And I'm sending it by mail drop.
Okay.
You should be getting it within a few seconds.
Yeah, within a few seconds. Okay.
I could also start talking without the benefit of the... So
please go ahead, and I should have them running in a few seconds for you. So please go ahead and start.
I need to go back to the screen. I can't find the screen now. Here we go. Okay, my real apologies about this. I hope by the time we start working on the images, we will have some of them on the side. Anyway, you can use your imagination. The title of my presentation is the Palestine Silenced History Through the Photographic Archives of the Institute for Palestine Studies. And luckily, we have just released a book, which I'm putting on the screen now. In English, it's titled Camera Palestina, and in Arabic, it's called أثر الصورة الفوتوغرافيا وتاريخ فلسطين المهمش, The Silenced History of Palestine Through the Photographic Archives. On the cover of the book is a beautiful image from 1878 of the builders of the Baga, or the Church of the Redeemer in the Old City, and it is from the collection of Wasif Johariye, the ethnographer and musician, whose 2 volumes of ethnographic memoirs were published by IPS on Ottoman Jerusalem and Mandate Jerusalem. And those photographs are treated in this book, which is called Camera Palestina. You can download it free of charge from the in English from the site of the Institute for Palestine Studies, or you can purchase it in Arabic. It just came out, so it should be available online from the site of the Institute for Palestine Studies. Anyway, the images I'm going to address, there are several collections in this photographic archives, the most important of which is the collection of Khalil Ra'ad, who lived between 1854 and 1957. He was a Lebanese photographer who came and resided in Palestine and lived to the ripe age of 103 years old. He died in 1957. Ra'ad began his career by doing portraitures in the old city of Jerusalem, and he began later to do a kind of street photography, basically catering to pilgrims, tourists, and also to the local population. And one feature of this is that he became very influenced with the current 19th century images of the Holy Land, which were catering to pilgrims, tourists, and people who saw the Holy Land through the biblical gaze, what we call the biblical gaze. And here I wrote, and I read, Khalil Ra'ad started his career as a Jerusalem photographer, training at the hands of Grigor Garabedian. You have to remember that the Armenian photographers were the pioneer photographers, not only in Palestine, but the whole Middle East. And the Grigor Garabedian, through the Armenian Patriarchate, began a workshop not only of taking photographs of the Holy Land, but also of catering to young photographers who wanted to learn the profession. And Khalil Ra'ad was trained in this tradition by Grigor Garabedian, who became his partner and also his competitor. He soon responded to the commercial demand for producing biblical images of the Holy Land for the lucrative pilgrimage market, which included postcards, magic lanterns, slides, stereoscopic images, and so on. Ra'ad's biblical images, while inspired by his intimate knowledge. Oh, here we go. Bravo, bravo. Is this your work, Tam?
No, I believe this is Jamila. I wish. I wish.
It's the mysterious tech team in the background. Please continue, Dr.
Now you have to teach me how to change the image. What should I do?
This is all that came. Yes, there you go.
So shall I tell you to give me next? Is this what you do? Okay.
That's correct.
This is Ra'ad. This is a photograph of Ra'ad in his old age. As I said, he lived until the ripe old age of 103 years old. And when he died, he was buried in the Rum Orthodox Cemetery in Beirut because he became a refugee after 48. And I will speak briefly about how he was incarcerated by the British authorities before he left Palestine, went back to Lebanon. His photographic collection was pillaged twice from his studios in Jaffa Street. First in December 1917 by the British forces, and he was accused of collaborating with the enemy, which is the Ottoman government and the Ottoman military. And I'll speak briefly about the importance of these photographs that he took for the war between 1914 and 1918. And then later again, in May 48, his studios on Jaffa Street were seized by the Haganah and taken over. And a large part of his collection, which was not saved, ended up in the Haganah collection. It was recently acquired by an Israeli archivist who made special images from the Israeli part of Ra'ad's collection. Next, please. This is Ra'ad's a studio on Jaffa Street, taken 1910, and he often, in his portraiture, he took pictures using his daughter Ruth and her friends. Some of them were taken by Palestinian natives in native dress, but quite often he dressed his own family so that he can sell them as postcards to pilgrims. Next, please. He started his career with street scenes, and these are very naturalistic images of people picking oranges, magic box, which I will show you in a minute, street salesman, and so on. Next. This is a very iconic picture taken by Ra'ad around the year 1905 of what is known in Arabic as Sunduq al-Ajab, and in English sometimes it's called the magic box. It has 4 or 5 lenses, and people watch the stories of Abu Zayd al-Hilali, Antar Abla, images from Alf Layla wa Layla, the Arabian Nights, and they are ground by manuela, and people would pay something like 1 piastre or half piastre. I myself used to watch this magic box in the city of Ramallah in the early 50s, and the payment for the hearing Abu Zayd al-Hilali's stories was usually 1 egg or 2 eggs or 1 loaf of bread, and sometimes 1 or 2 piastres. Next, please. Now, Khalil Ra'ad soon moved to the biblical market, and much of his work is informed by what is known as the biblical gaze. As I said, he started his training with Grigor Garabedian. He soon responded to the commercial demand for producing biblical images of the Holy Land for the lucrative pilgrimage market, which included postcards, magic lantern slides, which are projected through a kerosene lamp and then later electric lamp, and stereoscoping images, where the 2 images are slightly at an angle so that you get a 3D image when you look at it through the viewer. Ra'ad's biblical images, while inspired by his intimate knowledge of native figures, put him squarely in the Orientalist tradition of Holy Land photography. We're not trying to gloss over his entrenchment in the biblical grounding. Next, please. So much of the pictures that you see now and the next image are inspired by motifs from the biblical images, which Bonfils in Beirut, the Abdullah brothers in Istanbul, and many, many other groups, most especially the group known as the American colony photographers, used to recreate for the purpose of tantalizing and marketing for not only pilgrims, but also people who wanted to visit the Holy Land and could not afford it. So they were sold these stereoscopic images and so on. Next, please. The primary importance of Ra'ad was his portraiture, which is taking portraits of people from Jerusalem, from Palestine, from the area, and using these portraits as mementos. In fact, I don't know if the viewers are familiar with this, but a lot of the carte de visite, which was created in the early 20th century and late 19th century, was actually a picture like this one of Khalil Sakakini, where a poetic verse will be written underneath it, or the name and postal address of the person. So it's like a carte de visite. You go to visit somebody, they're not home, you leave your picture there, or you give it to them as memento. Raad soon made his mark as one of the most demanded portrait photographers in Syria and Palestine. His clientele began with local citizens seeking mementos. It also continued to seek native types in the image of biblical figures, but was soon followed by local notables using their portraits as gifts. And we will soon see how he began a career linking his fate with that of the Ottoman leadership. This picture is taken in 1906 by Khalil Sakakini. He took it especially by Raad in Jerusalem, and he left it with his fiancée, whose name was Sultana Abdo, so that she would not forget him while he's trying to make money in America. Next, please. So this is Raad's daughter in Palestinian peasant costume. And on the right is two girls. This is a very famous picture by Raad, was reprinted thousands of times, showing two peasant girls from Bethlehem in traditional Bethlehem dress, with the kiswa on their head, full of Ottoman coins. Next, please. So here we see biblical images, our father Abraham on the left. On the right is the parable of the, not the parable, what do you call it? Like the miracle of the bread and the fish, where Jesus in Cana takes 4 loaves of bread and 2 fishes and multiplies them by hundreds. So this boy is trying to recreate the biblical scene of the miracle of the fish and the bread. Next, please. But Raad soon began to take pictures of famous people. He became very, very well known. This is the bishop of the Coptic church in Jerusalem. And on the right is the figure of Jamal Pasha the Younger, Küçük Jamal as he was known, and he was very close to Raad, and he actually protected him when the Ottoman leadership found him trying to sell military postcards in the market, which was seen as betraying censorship. So he protected Raad. Next, please. This is a picture by Raad taken at the Mutran school of Jamal Pasha the Younger with his daughter and son. And on the right, we see the big Jamal the butcher, and in the company of a parliamentary delegation visiting Jerusalem in around 1914, 1915. Next, please. So his career actually took off in terms of doing military war photography, which is very important for us in terms of capturing what was going on in Palestine at the great transition between the end of the Ottoman period and the beginning of the British colonial mandate. Jamal Pasha, military governor of Syria and commander of the 4th Army, commissioned Raad to undertake a series of publicity photographs of the Ottoman forces. The purpose was to demonstrate through the local media, through magic lanterns, newspapers, etc., the prowess and technological superiority of the Ottoman forces, and to counter a light propaganda about the lack of preparedness about the army. Now, this made him very famous, but also made him a target of the British when Jerusalem fell to the army of Allenby. Next, please. One of his commissions was to do cinematographic propaganda for the Ottoman army, and in this case, this is a boat being sent to the Dead Sea, which Rad accompanied and did a cinema. He did some cinematic work. This is one of the few surviving films from that period of the Ottoman Navy on the road to Dead Sea. It sounds ridiculous, but there was actually an Ottoman Navy in the Dead Sea. Next, please. Also, we see a lot of use of photography as propaganda at the time. This is not by Rad. This is a picture taken by the Australian forces in Gaza, believe it or not. This picture was taken in 1916 in Gaza, showing the Ottoman forces doing maneuvering to capture Gaza from the Turkish army. Next, please. One of the iconic pictures of Rad in the Ottoman series was this banner for the defenders of Gaza, taken in August 1915. This was taken during the first Battle of Gaza, which the Ottomans won against the British. And in the second Battle of Gaza in 1916, they were defeated and they retreated back to the Bir Saba area. This is a picture taken by, very famous picture taken by Rad. And you see it on the covers of many books and periodicals from the period. Next, please. So Rad's work was very important in galvanizing a shared identity in Palestine, but also in Syria, for the Turks, Albanians, Arabs, Palestinians, Lebanese of the period. Elements of Ottoman integration, education reform in which Arabic and Turkish would become the language of instructions in public schools, freedom of the press. This was the product of the 1908 Constitutional Revolution, and the creation of higher educational institutions such as the Salahiyya College. I think this picture was taken at the Salahiyya College, which was established in Damascus and Jerusalem, in which an Ottoman Islamic identity will be encouraged. Again, Rad was brought in to take these pictures. Next, please. And then in 1908, the constitutional revolution was established, and the Sultan was taken, his autocratic regime was declared abolished, and Rad was called to Jaffa, where the biggest popular demonstration celebrating freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, established. The picture he took is of Ali Akram Bey standing on the corner, very dangerous pose, I would say, on the Sarai, which is the municipal building of Jaffa, addressing the crowds in 1908. Khalil Rad took this image of Governor Ali Akram Bey addressing the crowds of Jaffa in front of the Sarai, celebrating the new constitution in the Jaffa Clock Plaza in the spring of 1908. Next, please. Okay, we did this before. Next. So these are images. He was sent to the front in Bir Saba and Sinai to document the progress of the Ottoman army. And here I will show you a number of pictures. How are we doing with time? Am I okay? Do you want me to stop, or shall I continue?
Please, you can continue, of course.
I have 5 more minutes. So
yeah.
Okay, so these are the lancers of the Fourth Army on the road to Jericho. Very famous picture taken by Rad. Next, please. He also took pictures which are very gruesome, and he wasn't in Beirut when the 20 martyrs of the Burj Martyr Square were taken, but this was taken by a soldier accused of sedition in Jerusalem in 1915. The Ottoman campaign of photographic propaganda was propelled to a great degree by attempts to preempt secessionist movements. Of course, that's what happened in Beirut and in Damascus, especially after Jamal Pasha's waves of repression against Arab nationalists and the hanging of presumed secessionists in Damascus, Beirut, and Jerusalem. This photograph of a Palestinian soldier who violated military discipline, we don't really know what he did, was taken by Rad in October 1915. Was an attempt to create a warning example for other soldiers. The result was mainly the creation of revulsion and opposition to Jamal Pasha, now billed as Safah. We found this in Rad's collection, and it's not clear whether it was being used as a incitement against the regime or a warning for people to be aware of any sedition ideas, otherwise they will have this fate. It wasn't clear what the purpose of taking this picture was. Next, please. Now, what is interesting about all this is that the British arrested Khalil Rad in his studios and confiscated his collection. We know that he spent a bit of time in jail, but he was released soon after. I don't think he spent much time, but his collection of propaganda images for the Ottoman army, which I showed you some of them, became part of the collection of British military intelligence and ended up in a collection called the Saunders Collection in Oxford University. And the Saunders Collection, I will show you part of it, which may explain why he was arrested. So he was commissioned by Jamal Pasha to undertake a series of publicity photographs as well as cinematic films to propagate the Ottoman cause in Syria and abroad. He arranged, that is Jamal, arranged for Rad to travel with the armed forces and visit military camps, airfields, training centers, as well as trenches in the Beersheba and Suez fronts. Rad became the photographic commissar of the Fourth Army. And now the next few images is the reason why he was arrested. You will see some of them now. So please, next. Okay, this is welcoming the first train in the Southern Front. Next. This is a picture showing the opening of the Dar'a, Damascus, Dar'a, Jerusalem, Beersheba line, 1915, Fath al-Qarib. Next. These are images of Turkish soldiers facing the enemy in the Gaza region. Next. This is a signaling station in a place called Nabi Samuel, which is overlooking Jerusalem and played a very important role in reconnaissance and telegraphic intelligence. Next. These are people doing a factory for producing boots for soldiers. Next. This is the printing press of Yule. Yule is a Turkish word which means desert. This was a newspaper published on behalf of the army in Bir al-Saba. And this is people preparing the daily organ aimed at soldiers. And it was published in Turkish and in Arabic. Next. This is a picture of a soup kitchen in the desert for the armed forces. All of these were taken by Rad. Next, please. Now, this is a very important picture. This was not taken by Rad, but belongs to the Johariya collection in the Institute. And it shows the surrender of Jerusalem by Mayor Hussein Hashim al-Husseini, carrying the white flag and preparing to sign a surrender of Jerusalem on behalf of Izzat Pasha to the army of Alembi on December 9th in 1917. This picture was taken in an area west of Jerusalem called Sheikh Badr. This picture was printed and reprinted and reprinted, and there are many, many versions of it. But the version that we included in this book belongs to Wasif Johariya. Ra'ad wasn't there, but Wasif actually is the only one that puts the names of the people who appear in the picture and tells a different version than the one produced by the British at the time. So it's a very iconic picture, but one that's also extremely controversial. Next, please. So again, this is a picture of Austro-Hungarian soldiers marching outside Jaffa Gate in Jerusalem before the fall of Jerusalem. Next. Another picture of signaling units. You can see why he was arrested. I mean, he was showing pictures of the army facing the enemy in rather heroic fashion. And he probably was just doing his job. I don't think he meant to be a propagandist for the army, but he was so close to Jamal Pasha that he was accused of collaborating with the enemy. Next. So this is a gunship scene. Next. This is a picture of Catholic sisters serving in the Red Crescent facilities near Bir Saba. And one of the people in this picture is on the right is Dr. Tawfiq Kan'an, the famous physician and a close friend of Khalil Ra'ad. Next. This is Roshan Bey at the outskirts of Jerusalem, commanding Arab soldiers in the Jerusalem garrison. You see, Arab soldiers constituted about a third of the Ottoman army, and there was a special contingent of Arab soldiers, Arab meaning Syrians, Lebanese, and Palestinians, who served in the Southern Front. Next. This picture by Ra'ad is very important. It was taken of the new city of Bir Saba. Bir Saba was the only city, modern city in Palestine built by the Ottomans, and was built along a grid fashion using aerial photography and having modern institutions like a library, train station, electric power generators, and churches, mosques, but also huge municipal buildings. And there's a cinema which is located on the far right of the picture. So this is the modern Bir Sabah. The purpose of the building this city, Bir Sabah, was to domesticate Bedouins and produce an agricultural base for grains, which was necessary for the armed forces. So Bir Sabah became one of the most important logistic centers in Palestine before the war and during the war. And now, of course, Bir Sabah is an Israeli town, and it has a mixture of the remaining Bedouins who remained in the Negev and a large chunk of Russian, Soviet, Jewish immigrants. And one interesting feature of Bir Sabah today, besides being a Bedouin city, is that it has 7 Orthodox churches, and the Orthodox churches do not cater to the Palestinian Christians, but to the Russian immigrants who came from the Soviet Union and became a dominant force in Bir Sabah. They are Israeli, of course, but they came under the rubric of being Jewish immigrants, but soon it became clear that they were Christians. Next, please. This is Ibn military airport in Sinai, on the border between Sinai and the Nakba. Next. Okay, this is the last slide, so you can breathe easily now. Raad's photographic work and magic lanterns captured the lost world of Palestine and Syria in their early modernity, keeping a wondrous record of the rhythms of daily life. His work in the ranks of the Ottoman fighting forces, although intended as a campaign propaganda for Jamal Pasha's strategy, may seem today as a naive defense of a lost cause. At the period, however, Raad's work carried a great deal of credibility and conviction, for he believed that the CUP, the Committee of Union and Progress, was fighting for the unity of the homeland against the British and French invaders. The Ottoman soldiers, Turks, Arabs, and Bulgarians were his soldiers, and Sinai and Beersheba, France, were his frontiers. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tamari. That was such a treat. It was worth the wait. My goodness, we had we had our team in the back. We have a chat, and they were in awe over the pictures. What a beautiful thing to see Palestine from 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, from Khalil Raad's lens. Thank you so much, and for also the tour that you took us through those photos, for the understanding that you've given us. I truly mean it when I say that this is something that we don't get to see every day, and is very precious. And considering everything that we have been through in terms of the loss of archival material, the fact that this exists and that we can see it is truly a testament. So we are moving into the discussion period. So we have a couple questions for you, just to draw out some of the things that you were talking about in your presentation. And the first, so I also had the pleasure of reading Camera Palestina, and I do encourage everyone in the audience to read it. If you enjoyed the pictures, you'll enjoy the stories as well that go along with it, and everything that Dr. Tamari and his colleagues have done to bring that story to life. And in it, you and your co-authors, you advocate for an indigenous visual understanding of Palestine using these photographic collections. So my question is, could you speak more to that concept and what it offers us in giving a more complex understanding of Palestine as both its history and also in the present?
So you want me to speak more about which concept?
How we can take an indigenous visual understanding of Palestine.
I see. Okay. Well, the framework I'm presenting is that of photographic images, but this is part of a much larger archive, and it's a very precious one because the lenses in which we see Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon, that period, comes through Western colonial visitors who framed the images in a certain way to buttress. I mean, one thing they, of course, were interested in is the exotic nature of the land. And another one is they wanted to reconstruct a biblical gaze on how people dressed and how people behaved that in their mind showed the Oriental, what they call the immovable Orient. So here we have a number of native photographers like Irsas or Abdullah Brothers or Khalil Ra'ad, and there are quite a few of them who started very early. And one should always remember that the pioneers of native photography in the East were the Armenians. And why the Armenians, I can tell you later, but that's a very interesting coincidence. Give us a completely different, well, not completely different image, but one which is, which reflects the inner life of the population. And many of these photographs, as Rad indeed was, were very much influenced by the Western biblical gaze, because he wanted to sell his photographs, and these and his market was a foreign market. But he also was very keen at, especially in portraiture, in street scenes, in showing demonstrations. People went to him in their traditional dress to share with their families and so on. So he preserved a side of the native traditions which we do not see in other, or we see exoticized and distorted in the other side. Unfortunately, many of these images were lost. And one thing we are keen today of bringing them back to life is through family collection. In our archive, we try to convince people to give us what they may consider mundane, and some would consider scandalous, because it shows your brother as a child with his private parts glowing in the dark. So people usually do not want to share these things, but they are very important for us because it shows how people presented themselves and how they dressed, and sometimes how they undressed themselves. So that is part of our task in this business of keeping the archive. You thought that was funny,
I
huh?
can certainly attest that one finds some pretty surprising things in archives, and that's just grand. We want to know all of these things. We want to know all the many faces and phases of Syria and Bilad al-Sham, and especially, it really resonates in this moment in so many ways. And I'll leave it at that. But one question we always ask Dr. Tamari at the end of all of our sessions is we give people an opportunity to speak to our audience and to share anything you might like to say to archivists, librarians, and memory workers listening here today and later at the recording about what they can do in their own work to counteract the archival erasure of Palestine and uplift Palestinian narratives for liberation and return. Our audience is from all over the world, certainly in Palestine and our region, but certainly also in Western countries and different places where, unfortunately, also they have a lot of our records that, they should return. That's what we always say in the Archives and Heritage for Palestine series. I don't know if you want to speak to that or add anything to what you'd like to say to archivists before we conclude today.
Well, archivists all over are doing magnificent work, trying to preserve, enhance, and also dig collections which have been either seemingly lost or have been kept in private hands and sometimes in government hands. I mean, like the Saunders collection, which was basically looted by the British, and the Rad Studio collection, which was looted also by the Haganah, and sometimes under the freedom of, when certain times elapse, you can claim these pictures and try to bring them to the public. And sometimes you have to fight for it because they are neglected or destroyed. You are probably familiar with the AP collection in the Israeli National Library, which is the absentee property photographs and manuscripts and books which were taken over from the private homes of people. Now, this luckily is available for the public to look at, but we have been trying to retrieve it, or at least to make it publicly available so people can see this heritage. You asked me, I really don't have any advice because people know what to do in this matter. But one thing which concerns us is the huge amount of manuscripts, private papers, and photographic collections kept by private families. Surprisingly, in the war of 48, in the Nakba, many people just left with nothing in their hands except the bare essentials. And in many cases, their photographic albums were either lost or seized. But some of them actually did take albums and did take individual photographs, but they are not making it available, accessible. It's a struggle, ongoing struggle to try to convince people to make these very precious. I mean, to them, it may be very intimate, but to us, it's a very precious record of a past which has been obliterated. And therefore, it is one of the few features of our heritage which we can resurrect and make available for research, but also for public viewing. So my advice is that you try hard to reach people with these collections before they destroy them, because sometimes they destroy them because they think it's too intimate, too private, too scandalous, and sometimes destroy it out of negligence. They just don't think this is of an importance to the public. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Tamari. I mean, certainly this is the most clear emphasis on the importance of family records we've had yet in the Archives and Heritage series, and personal records we've had yet. So just to echo that in sort of archival lingo, and also to say that as it happens, this is something we are worried about in some of the projects Tam and I work on as both actual archivists as well as archival science scholars. Maybe what I'd also like to say is I think as archivists, maybe we need to educate people also on the importance of these, as you're saying, especially for Palestine. Like you're saying, there's so many gaps a past that's been liberated, records that have been made inaccessible, but also educate people that there can be time limits set, so the records don't have to be made available right away. We can actually create periods of them being closed, but at least they can be made accessible, say, when people pass away and they feel less vulnerable about sharing them. So I'll leave those as my concluding remarks and hand them over to Tam for other concluding remarks, or we go over to you, Dr. Tamari, for your final words for this event.
Yeah, I'll just end with saying that it's incredible how the Nakba has changed Palestinians' relationship to personal materials and personal, like, family archives, because the sense of loss is so dear. And the idea, I know, in exchange, like, so on one hand, there's the feeling that it's too intimate. And then there's the feeling that it's so intimate, you want to keep it in your family to pass down to your children, to pass down to your grandchildren, instead of giving it to an archive, which can feel very impersonal. So then there's that other added level of education that needs to be done about how, like, it needs to be almost like a public accessible collection, because it belongs to all of Palestine in a way. And one thing you say in your book is that archives, and especially visual archives, are a testimony. And it is a testimony to Palestine's long, enduring history. So it's very valuable that we have these archives and they're accessible, and it's not just in families. So hopefully, inshallah, that will happen. And then I'll pass it to you, Dr. Tamari, if you have any last words you want to share with the audience.
You want more last words?
If you have any, if you've said everything you need to say.
No, I just want to thank you for having me, and I just want to point out that there are gaps in the archival knowledge which we should be focusing on. It's very interesting that the 19th century, the late 19th century, which is the dawn of photography, is heavily present and heavily available and accessible. The early 20th century is also quite accessible and present. The early mandate and the later mandate are heavily covered by the photographic and cinematic archives. But there are gaps. One gap is the 1950s, during the Jordanian administration of the West Bank and the Egyptian administration of Gaza. So from 1948 to 1965, 67, you have very little amount of archiving that is available. Although from newspapers, periodicals, visiting photographers, there are material, but we have to dig it out. An example of this is the important work of the Armenian photographer Kegham, K-E-G-H-A-M, Kegham, who was a very prolific photographer in Gaza. And his grandson now has his collection in Cairo. And we are beginning to see part of Kegham's work, which is very profound, very important. There are other people besides Kegham, photographers, whose work has yet to be produced. So the 1950s and in Gaza, and the 1950s in the West Bank during the Jordanian rule, and also the early 60s in the Israeli military government period in the Galilee. The photographic record from that period, either for censorship reason or because the records have been marginalized and kept away. Also, we don't have much. After that, we have all of a sudden a revolutionary transformation in the nature of technology, audiovisual technology, which makes every corner of Palestinian life covered and covered tragically, as now in Gaza, and dramatically as in the rest of Palestine in the contemporary period.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.